Are you looking to get ready, be prepared, and transform your financial future? Then you've come to the right place. This is the Get Ready Money Podcast with Tony Stewart, where Tony has insightful conversations with financial experts who are changing the way we think about money. Catch up on the latest financial trends and hear practical advice from Tony and his expert guests so you can build healthy habits that work. Be empowered with tips for implementing small changes that can have a big impact on your financial future. So sit back and get ready to hear from today's guest.
Welcome to the Get Ready Money Podcast, changing the way we think about money. I'm your host, Tony Stewart. Today, I'm joined by Michael Banner, host of the 62 Who Knew podcast, to talk about the double-edged sword of longer lifespans. Michael, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you here today.
Oh, thank you so much, Tony, for inviting me.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself. What is your origin story and how did it lead to 62 Who Knews?
You know, like so many people, it's a personal story. I had just a great father, probably the greatest father that ever lived. And we always said from the time I was young that when Dad was at the end of his life, I would be the person to take care of them, or Mom. But we lost Mom too early to cancer. And Dad's been gone 20 years now, still miss him every day. But in that last 6 months to a year of his life, where we bought a house with each other with what they call the mother-in-law's bedroom, 2 master bedrooms, and he had a high quality of life until probably the last 6 weeks. But I was his caretaker, and I was proud of it, and I was so glad I was doing it. But I learned the hard way the first couple of times that he needed me, let's say in more sensitive situations. If he was still here, Tony, he'd kill me for saying this on your show. But the first time he needed help in the shower, the first time he fell down, quite frankly, the first time he had an accident. And when I was helping him in the middle of the night and cleaning him up, and keep in mind, this was a 6'1", 210-pound, highly decorated ex-POW from World War II. This was the man's man, the greatest example of the greatest generation. So this was hurting his pride. And I'd say we were about 2 months into that 1 year scenario. And it was about 4 a.m, and he was back in bed and, was alert. Everything was fine, but he was getting weaker. And I was sitting on the chair next to his bed, went, okay, I'm going to go back to my bedroom. And he went, look, kiddo, called me kiddo till the day he died. I've been thinking about this. I go, what? He goes, I'm glad you're doing what you're doing. We always talked about this, and I'm proud of you. But this is not what I want you to do. When we talked about all those years of you taking care of me and being there, I kind of envisioned us bowling with each other, shooting pool, going to baseball games. Of course, now with grandchildren, taking me to your daughter's, cheerleading practices, your son's karate, Josh's karate tournaments. Point blank, not wiping my ass. I don't like this. If you have to edit that out, I understand. And I don't want you to do it. I don't want you to be my nurse. I want you to be my son these last. And he knew the time was near, although he lasted for a year after they gave him a few months to live. And I said, okay. And although we had a brilliant financial planner and we always followed his directions, we ignored him 15 years before that when he said, buy long-term care insurance for your mother and father. It is the greatest thing in the world. We always heeded his advice. And we said, no, Michael's going to take care of his dad. We don't need long-term care insurance. But we did. And of course, it was too late to buy it. And I brought in-home care. Started out at 8 hours a day. Then it went to 12. And the last few months of his life, 24 hours. It made Dad's quality of life incredible. We did nothing but have fun. But this was 20 years ago. And it cost me about maybe $9,000 a month. And keep in mind that Dad had, of course, Medicare, a great Medicare supplemental policy. And because he was an ex-POW, the best stuff from VA. I mean, the VA just parted the waters, for their POWs. And still, to make sure Dad was safe, when I was out writing mortgages, running our mortgage company, or at night, I was spending $8,000 to $9,000 a month. Can you imagine what that is today? And that's really and truly 20 years ago when I went, wow, I wasn't a naive person. I went, we weren't rich, Tony, but we do well. I went, my God, what does the rest of the world do when they don't have that 9 or 10,000 a month? And I was working hard to write that check, but I was able to do it. And I asked a couple of the nurses and healthcare and in-home care workers, and they went, Michael, your dad would be in a Medicaid facility. And believe me, you don't want your father in a Medicaid facility. And I know Medicaid is a blessing, Tony, for low, for people that can't afford anything else. I'm not dissing it, but when I lost my father 20 years ago, became a staggering advocate for people in their 50s, early 60s, while you're still healthy, to get long-term care insurance. So when you're in your 70s, 80s, and 90s, you can be at home, with the greatest care that money can buy because you paid for it 20 years ago. And that's when I became a long-term care insurance advocate. It's when I became a reverse mortgage use of home equity to help pay for certain services in your older age. But that's what changed my life. Having my dad say to me, I need you to be my son this last year of my life, not my nurse. It was a life changer.
Yeah, well, I think that's something we all need to think about, the aging plans, because so many people even expect their kids to be their caregiver. And for a number of reasons, like as you point out, in your situation, it's not the right role. You're not a trained caregiver. It changes the relationship. But for other kids, they're just not going to do it. And, so it's not fair to anybody
And
to
even the
have
ones
that
that
expectation.
And even the ones that want to do it, we have both had guests on our podcast. We discussed this when you were on 62 Who Knew. The spouse, the daughter or the son, in my case, it was the son, but usually it's the daughter, who takes a year or 2 years off of work to take care of mom or dad, or their mother-in-law or father-in-law. Sometimes that year turns into several years. Suddenly that person, man or woman, son or daughter, is out of the workforce. Their family is not making as much money as they used to. They're not contributing to their IRA and 401k. And suddenly it's 10 or 15 years later, and they're going, wow, that couple of few years that I took off to take care of mom and dad and mom and dad-in-law, oh my God, this had an incredible effect on my financial world. So on my children, because I couldn't work those few years. And again, all the studies about the emotional stress of the caretaker. Every time I read one of those, it just staggers me how many times the caretaker gets sick because of the stress of taking care of the other person because they weren't trained for that.
Exactly. Well, let's talk about, the theme of this episode, which is the double-edged sword. So what is the double-edged sword of longer lifespans?
Well, I'm not old enough to be your father, but I'm old enough to be your older brother, way older brother. And when you're
not that much,
when your father, my father, or our grandfathers thought about, do I have enough money to live the rest of their lives? They were thinking about maybe the next 10 years of their life, retiring in their early to mid 60s, dying in their early to mid 70s. Well, now, according to the many studies, if you make it to 62 in this country, now notice I didn't say, Tony, make it healthy, just make it. But because of scientific and medical breakthroughs of the last several decades, you have a 50-50 chance of making it to 90. So the double-edged sword of longer lifespans, which affects everyone in the world, but we're only concerned about America for this particular podcast. If you're not in the top 2% of this country and you have more than $5 million in net worth, the other 98% of us are going to be working in our 60s, 70s, and 80s to make sure we can have some sort of quality of life. But the truth of the matter is, so it is a double-edged sword. We're going to be around longer. We're going to see our grandchildren graduate college and get married, but it's going to be hard work. And there are a lot of obstacles as you get to be in your 70s and 80s that, again, prostate cancer, breast cancer, female cancer of all type, that in today's world is 100% curable if you catch it in early stages. But can you afford the right medical attention? And if so, is it going to devastate your financial statement? And yet you still got 20 years to go. So that double-edged sword is real. And I guess my message has been, and why I created 62 Who Knew? Who knew you're going to be here? Half the time you've already been here. My message is that it's not just the top 2% that can be prepared for this. Mass America can buy a long-term care policy in their 50s with an affordable premium. And by the time they get to their 70s or 80s, have that same great coverage as their wealthy cousin. They can put a certain amount of money into certain annuity products and investments in their 50s and 60s. So in their 70s and 80s, there's a big bank balance there that can give them a high quality of life. The tools are out there, but I don't see a lot of platforms blasting out that message to people. I see my friends, myself included, learning it when it's too late. Well, I'm 72. I'm going to be 67 in 10 days. I'm 67. I wish I would have done that 10 years ago. Well, yeah. So let's not make that mistake for the next generation. So that's the double-edged sword. It's great we're going to be here, but now let's be here with high quality.
Yeah. I mean, that's really it. Can you afford the longer lifespan? I mean, that's the thing. I mean, we're seeing longevity annuities. We're seeing actually in the financial planning community being open to single premium immediate annuities, the fixed annuities, especially because a lot of us don't have pension plans.
That's right.
So we need a fixed income, and Social Security will not be enough.
No, and if it's even here. No, you hit the nail on the head. We have become a 401k IRA nation. Sure, if you're a teacher or a police officer or a railroad worker, you still have those pensions, but most of America doesn't have a pension. Even working for large companies, those companies have taken the pensions away. And I don't care what anybody says, put maximum amount in your IRA, put your maximum amount in your 401k. But if you want to retire in your mid 60s and live to be 90, you're going to run out of that money in your mid 70s, maybe late 70s. And then you're going to be in Walmart going, would you like a cart? And I don't mean that disrespectfully. I just see it all the time. Nothing but respect.
Yeah, I mean, I'll push back on that a little bit is I don't think that's the eventuality for everybody, but yeah, it's definitely something, and it is the biggest fear that people have as they age, running out of money. And it is as you point out, it is a realistic fear.
Yeah, and as you probably know, it's and this just staggered me 10 years ago when I first read about it, but now I follow up every year. For many, many, many years, a lot of learning platforms, Boston College, Harvard, always did, studies once a year. That once you make it into your mid 60s, and when I say studies, thousands, tens of thousands of people in their mid 60s, people of all economic backgrounds, religious backgrounds, ethnicities. And they always wanted to know what were like the top 10 fears of people in their mid 60s. And for like 50 years, everyone's number one fear as they approach 65 or 68 was death. I mean, you're going, yeah, oh my God, I'm not as young as I used to be. And Uncle Ralph died at 78. So you're thinking of your of your mortality. Until 8 years ago, and if you look this up, and I hope your viewers do, Google the hell out of this, chat, the hell out of this. 8 years ago, every one of these studies changed. Death is now the number 2 fear of American seniors. Number 1 is running out of money before they die. And when you think about that, for this great country, that our parents and grandparents' number 1 fear is not dying. It's being broke before they die. That's a very big, broad statement that America is saying, and yeah, I think people that do what you do for a living and what I'm attempting to do to help people prepare for that, I think it's a noble effort.
Yeah, no, it's a necessary effort. So, let's talk a little bit deeper about that. Is why is it important to have an aging plan, and when should we start creating an aging plan?
In my opinion, probably mid 50s. I certainly didn't. I wasn't smart enough to do it. I started doing it in my early 60s. Again, most people don't do it because it's the most sensitive subject there is. I mean, let's face it, being incapacitated, having your children have to do things for you. I know it's going to happen, but it's not happening to me yet. We'll talk about that next year. That's what they say to their financial planner. And now with me, there was a health scare 5 years ago, and a health scare, knock wood, that I came through with flying colors. And I went, oh my God, I need long-term care insurance. I need vital expense insurance. I need to update my will, which hasn't been updated since my 30s. And everything that's in it is crap. A lot of times for the human race, they got to be scared into this emotional stuff. But, I would say mid 50s to early 60s. If you're not sitting down and having this discussion with your financial planner, and let's face it, Tony, mass America doesn't have a financial planner. You're discussing it with your son, your daughter, your older brother. But damn it, have the discussion. Think about, do you want your daughter helping you in the shower? You got to think about that. It's great to say she's going to come take care of me, but do you really want that? Do you want your daughter to not go to work for a year, or your son to take care of you? Do you want them under that emotional stress? I think people have to start having that conversation. Again, I'd say mid 50s to mid 60s. And if you're not, you're doing yourself and your family a disservice.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think what's important for people to take away and hear this a lot on the show with my guests is that you didn't start off with talking about financial products or services or tactics. You started off that it's about having conversations and thinking about your goals and what you want to have come out of it, what the outcomes are. And when you start from that, is then once you've had that conversation, then you can start plugging in the products. So let's talk about one of those strategies, because there's a lot of confusion about this, is what is a reverse mortgage and who is it right for it? Because we've heard so many things about reverse mortgages and most of them are not good.
And that's, I'm glad you said that because it's so true. I'll say this: never, ever, ever in the history of the financial world, since the first caveman started his first savings account, has there been a financial product that is surrounded by more misinformation and half truths as a reverse mortgage. Now, like a lot of bad things in this country, sometimes misinformation and half truths start in reality. And the reality is, most people think reverse mortgages have been around for like the 21st century, the year 2000. But they've been around since 1962. And the first 45 years that they were around, Tony, it was the wild, wild west. Very little government regulation, being abused, being advertised wrong, people taking advantage of seniors by taking the equity out of their home and using it for unstable investments that they shouldn't have. But that all changed early in the 21st century. And today, the truth of the matter is a reverse mortgage, which is really nothing more than a line of credit that allows people 62 years old and above to access a portion of their equity for quality of life. And that's what's important. It's not to buy stocks or bonds or annuities or invest into a restaurant. This is for pure quality of life. It's funny, the industry recognizes life insurance and long-term care insurance as quality of life. You can use a reverse mortgage proceeds for that. But that's what it's for. And of course, it comes with the unbelievable option of not having to make a monthly principal and interest payment until you're dead. Most people say, well, you're alive, but I want to be emotional. Until you're dead. And no, it's not a gimmick. No, it's not a gimme from the government. You are accruing interest. It is the classic American pay now or pay later. And this is paying way, way later because you're gone. So the next misinformation, the next half truth is, oh my God, then my children are responsible for the debt. But they're not. Not in today's reverse mortgage. Yesteryear's reverse mortgage, yes, your estate was responsible for the debt. But in today's reverse mortgage, and when I say today, I mean the last 2 decades, your home stands for the mortgage. Your home is the guarantor. The clients are not even personally guaranteeing today's HECM, home equity conversion mortgage, meaning that you die, your house is worth less than you owe on it, because let's say we're in a recession like 2008 through 2012. Mom left you annuities, life insurance, stocks, and bonds. In any other mortgage in the country, that lender can say, well, Tony, I'm sorry about your loss, but mom and dad did personally guarantee this mortgage. So let's talk about their other assets. Mom and dad don't personally guarantee a reverse mortgage. So the assets of the estate cannot attach by federal law. It has gone from one of the most unstable senior financial tools to one of the most safest financial tools that a senior can use. The access of home equity for high quality of life. And again, we still have so many detractors. I'll just say it, Dave Ramsey, who goes on his show with 1.2 million followers and says, I don't care what the paperwork says, they're going to take your house. Yeah, you don't care what the documents from the government say. Well, that's ludicrous. No one's taking your house as long as you pay your taxes and insurance, real estate taxes and homeowners insurance. There's no term on a reverse mortgage. You can't outlive it. If the house goes upside down, it doesn't make a difference. No one can take your home as long as you pay your taxes and insurance and HOA, homeowners association, if applicable. So that's the number one myth. Oh my God, what's going to happen to my kids? Well, number one, this is not about your kids. It's about your quality of life. And if you have nice kids, they're going to agree with that. And if your kids say to you, well, I know you're not playing golf enough. I know you don't have your Medicare supplemental policy. I know you're not taking vacations. But damn it, I want that house free and clear when you die. Well, then you have bad children. Sorry to tell you that. I don't know what went wrong with them. Maybe you dropped them on their head when they were babies. But I've yet to meet children like that. I meet 40 and 50-year-old people that go, whatever mom and dad need for their high quality of life, I couldn't care less what they leave me. That's the way America's supposed to be. And then, of course, we have other options now besides a reverse mortgage. We have Chiefs, which I know you're becoming very familiar with, which is the fractional sale of the equity in your home. Not a mortgage, but literally, if you have $1 million house, why not sell 10% of it for $100,000? What? Unheard of, but will be one of the most common ways to fund retirement services and products very soon. You're learning about it. They're a major sponsor of 62 Who Knew. The ability to sell a fractional part of your home, retain ownership, retain all the tax benefits. No one can tell you when to sell, and there's no payment. If you have $1 million house and you sell 20% of it, you get a check for $200,000. Now fund your annuity for your 70s. Now fund your single premium long-term care, life insurance with a long-term care policy. And so what? You make less on your house in 20 years. You're set for life. So there's reverse mortgages, there's Chiefs, which are really two different things, but the use of equity. There are all sorts of ways for mass America to have those same planning tools, as their rich brother. There really is.
Well, fantastic. And I think, as you point out with reverse mortgages, what's important is to understand what you're buying, to ask questions, and then to follow the rules. But for our listeners and viewers out there, just a quick note, I am not affiliated in any way with Chiefs, and this is not a promotion. They are not a sponsor,
That's right.
and this is not an endorsement for Chiefs in any way. Michael is just giving us sharing a quick education overview of the Chiefs concept. So, Michael, it's time for what I call the Get Ready Hot Take Trio. These are three quick questions to help the listeners change the way they think about money. The first one is, what myth are you trying to break about reverse mortgages?
The fact that the bank is going to take your house, you own your house, the disposition of your home after you die is only your choice, no one else's, and your children, your heirs, are never, ever responsible for the debt. That would be the most important thing about the myth of reverse mortgages.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing that. And I think, as you said earlier, is older reverse mortgages work differently. So, that's also something to keep in mind, is to take a look and see how old the reverse mortgages. And as we've been talking about, is to read the terms of that reverse mortgage and make sure you understand them. And to realize that, like with everything else, products and services change and evolve. So whenever you buy something, if you buy it 3 years from now, investigate it, because it may not work the same way as Michael is describing today. So
that's exactly correct. Use a professional like yourself. I mean, I don't care if it's a reverse mortgage, if it's long-term care insurance, if it's Chiefs, it doesn't, if it's underwater basket weaving lessons, it doesn't make a difference. Engage a professional. Yeah, it's just amazing. People go to a doctor and they don't try and diagnose themselves. They go to a doctor. Well, they need a doctor of financial people, and that's someone like you. You're a financial doctor. That's what they need to help guide them to make an informed decision.
Yeah, so real quick before we get into the next question, what is a good resource on reverse mortgages?
Well, funny name, NRMLA, NRMLA. That's the National Reverse Lending Association of America. They have great things on their website. Quite frankly, you could contact me directly. I've been a national spokesman for reverse mortgages for going on 2 decades, and you can contact me through the 62 Who Knew website, which is www.62whoknew.com. I could say you could Google it, but I'm not exaggerating when I tell you you'll get about 12 million hits. And if you read the first 10, you'll go, I think I know less now, because they all conflict each other. Because again, it's surrounded by misinformation and half-truths. Find a reverse mortgage expert, which is easy to do on Facebook or LinkedIn. Give me a call, email, or anything. I'll answer your questions. Not every mortgage person that can do FHA loans, because a reverse mortgage is FHA, they are, quote, able to offer reverse mortgages. There's about 1 million of those people. But there's only about 500 or 600 reverse mortgage specialists in this country. So when your mortgage guy goes, your cousin, the mortgage guy goes, yeah, my company does those. Have you ever done one? Well, no. How many did your company do last year? I don't know, 7. Well, then you're not an expert on reverse mortgages. And you want an expert, because this is your equity. This is your retirement. It's not coming back.
Yeah, well, that's great. And so everybody watching and listening, I'll have a link to Michael's website and podcast, and to the National Reverse Mortgage Lending Association website. And I think another thing that I'll add on there is what Michael said about the search results, is also beware of the AI summary. For something like this, is do not rely on that. As you point out, it's good to find experts for these types of things. So, Michael, let's get out the time machine for a minute. What advice would you give your younger self, knowing what you know now about money?
Wow. Well, I wouldn't have spent like I spend. I'm one of, I'm on the upper end of baby boomers. I'd have to say, for the great majority of my life, if I made X, I spent 110 or 120% of X because I like my lifestyle. And my generation, we're a payment generation. A car doesn't cost $100,000. It costs $912 a month. I can afford that. And that was a stupid way to look at life on my part. I would tell my younger self to start preparing in my 40s and 50s, for my 70s and 80s. I would tell my younger self to arm myself with experts, which I did in my early 60s. I should have done that in my 50s. I should have had a team of people knowing more than I know. So I'd have, quite frankly, a much higher net worth today. I would just say be smarter and involve, and have a team of financial people, medical people. I mean, it took a really big, I just lost 55 pounds in the last 18 months. And I was quite obese for quite some time. Still need to lose another 25. But it took a terrible health scare for me to drop that weight. What a moron. I mean, really and truly, what an idiot I was. I was so overweight for 15 years, and I'll pay for that for the next 20 years with other health issues. But I'm fine. Life is good. Not exactly skinny, not exactly svelte, but I'm not 292 anymore. I'm 240. I'm 235, and I'm going to lose another 25. But it took 2 days in the hospital to scare the hell out of me. That was stupid, and I don't want other people to do that.
Well, thanks for sharing, and I'm glad that things are going better for you with that.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
but
soon
as you point out,
I'll be putting on the tights and the cape soon.
Well, that might make for a more interesting show, a different kind of show.
We'll definitely get lots of viewers. I don't know if it's the kind of viewers we want, but we'll definitely get lots of viewers.
It would change the nature of the show. But I think what you point out, though, is start preparing early. I used to whitewater raft, and that's what they would say is no matter how early you think you should be setting up, you should be setting up earlier. Starting your move before you think you need to start your move,
and
rather than when you
analogy.
think. And that works with your money. No matter when you think you should be doing it, start planning a little bit earlier because you don't know what's going to happen in between. So, Michael, to wrap up, what is your number one tip for changing the way we think about money?
Wow. I guess the number one tip is money and emotion, money and mental stability are tied to each other. It's really for a capitalistic entrepreneur like myself, for these words to come out of my mouth, it's not really the money. It's the protection of you and your family that money creates. And think about that more than what is this going to cost? Think about what is the benefit to me in my next 20 or 30 years? How is it going to affect my children and grandchildren if I make the wrong decision now, 10 or 20 years from now? When you're younger, it's the money. I don't care what anybody says. People that say that money can't buy happiness, well, it could sure as shit rent the hell out of it. I'll tell you that. It's more fun to have money than it is to not have money. But as you get older, it actually is more about the mental and emotional stability of what your hard work, let's not say money, hard work has been able to give you and your family. And even if it is something as simple as, paying for your funeral before you die. I remember how I felt picking out my father's casket, a day after he died. I was barely not crying still, let alone thinking about all of this stuff and what would Dad want. I did it not to save money. I really didn't. I did it so my 3 children don't have to think about that. Dad took care of it. And that's what you're supposed to do as a mom or dad, take care of it. So that would be don't think of it so much as how much is money, but how much of your heart, how much of your children's heart you have to take a piece of to not prepare for this.
That's great advice. That's great advice. Money and emotion are tied to each other. And I think, as you point out, at the end of the day, it's not the money, it's what we put into it and what the money represents to us. So Michael, where can people learn more about you? I know you mentioned earlier, but if you can just repeat that, and where can people tune into the 62 Who Knew podcast?
Well, 62 Who Knew is on every podcast platform known to man. We get 90% of our listeners from YouTube, but of course YouTube, Facebook, just everywhere. iHeart. What else? I sent you the whole list. I know you posted it. So we're everywhere. If you want to learn more about long-term care insurance or reverse mortgages, you go to www. or final expense insurance or anything that we're doing. You go to www.62whoknew. There are different little squares there: insurance, mortgages, final expense, Chiefs.
Well, thanks for sharing, and for everybody, as always. All of Michael's links will be in the podcast show notes. Michael, thanks again for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to have you back on 62 Who Knew. I think there's a lot of ways we can help people together. We think alike about a lot of things. We just want to help people.
Appreciate that. And thank you, everyone, as always, for tuning into this episode of the Get Ready Money podcast. If you learned something today that changes the way you think about money, please be sure to subscribe and share this episode with a friend. You can also join the Get Ready movement at tonystewart.com to receive the Get Ready newsletter, podcast updates, and free access to my Get Ready toolkit of financial literacy resources. Until next time, let's change the way we think about money.